Hey there, my name's Taryn, and in this video, I'm gonna try to talk to you all like a person instead of the robot that I've been sounding like lately. Oh, and we're gonna make a tree. I really wanted to make some kind of spoopy looking shrubbery, and I came across the coolest name ever.
Wintersplinter.
Which, it's just too good to pass up. And no, I haven't played Curse of Strahd or explored the world of Ravenloft, but I wanted to make a terrifying tree and use as many alliterations as allowed. I always try to emphasize that I start a project by drawing it first. Looking at reference images is important, but having a strong visual in your mind is what makes the making part go by smoothly. Even just a quick sketch is, in its own way, a version of making the thing. I can easily go back to all my old projects and point out which ones I planned with illustrations versus the ones that I brute forced my way through. You'll also find that with terrain pieces, I often use these unpainted miniatures for scale. They were gifted to me by a colleague who has been playing and painting since the inception of miniature wargaming, and they're among my most prized nerd possessions. Once I have an idea of how large the tree is going to be, I can start drawing and cutting my cardboard base. This is a thick, corrugated cardboard, and I'll be covering it with a homemade Sculpting mold. After watching a few videos online and price comparing, I decided to just make my own using a fast set plaster, shredded toilet paper, and warm water. When you break down the costs, Sculpting mold is twice as expensive as buying plaster, at least here in New Zealand anyway, and it just seems silly to purchase it when you can make it yourself. Now that the base is made and curing, I can move on to sculpting the tree. Almost all of my sculptures have tinfoil inside of them. This is the most affordable sculpting material on the planet, and it allows you to build up volume very quickly while keeping the overall weight of the final sculpture very light. More importantly for me, aluminium is one of the most abundant metals on the planet. It can be recycled, it's biodegradable. What this means is when you make mistakes, and trust me, we all do, you can try again and again as you need to. As a pro tip, a teaspoon or just any metal tool is really great for compressing the foil, and the tighter you push it in now, the less you have to fight with it later on. It was in this stage that I thought I might try to give it some texture, but I quickly abandoned this idea as the paper mache going over the top is going to completely obscure it. And in case you need some evidence on how we all make mistakes, here's my first attempt at the tree stump compared to the second one. Yeah. Now, for the tree branches, I took long rolls of foil that I compressed and twisted to give them some rigidity, but also allowing me to bend them into shape. I would compare the size and shape of each branch to both my original sketch and to the trunk of the tree. This is the part of the project where I absolutely wanted to throw it in and just give up. I mean, look at this thing. Look at that shiny, goofy, toothless mouth. Anyway, once I had some larger branches worked out, I could start hot gluing smaller pieces of foil onto them to add some variety, and then I started to punch holes one at a time, filling them in with hot glue and adding each tree branch. And again, that same gripping anxiety comes back to play as I slowly create this aluminium budget brand beholder. Ugh. I just repeated a similar process for the roots, and this elder god of garbage was completed. My basing mixture has had more than enough time to set up, and I'm now just going to make sure that the sculpture still fits and trim the roots down to size. And so far, so good. Part of the problem with this gangly looking tree is exactly that. The limbs on their own look fragile and silly. So taking some more pieces of scrunched up foil, I start building mass and volume to the shape. Some sculptors may have just made the branches in one go. I like to build up piece by piece, like adding muscles onto bone. Or at least that's what I'm writing down in my notes now to sound like I actually know what I'm doing. The fact of the matter is, we can always make changes to the armature because at the end of the day, it's just tinfoil. And as you can see, it's looking so much better with a little extra meat on them bones. Now, there's a lot of different recipes for paper mache, and unless you want mold in your miniatures or terrain, don't add flour to your recipe. I'm using a packing tissue paper from an order I got in the mail and a combination of watered down PVA and just straight up high quality wood glue. And honestly, the wood glue works so much better on its own. An old chip brush is great for pushing the paper down into the foil and keeping it there. Once the glue had time to dry, I was actually pretty stoked to see that this thing was coming together. Except for that busted mouth. Oh my god, Taryn, would you finish the mouth, please? I drew some small spiky teeth on cereal box cardboard, cut them out, and checked the fit before I committed to them. This is already looking so much better. Once I was happy with these little guys, I glued them down to some thick packing paper for extra strength and also covered up any of the really thin patches on the tree with that same paper. Now I could base the inside of the tree's mouth, since it would be harder to reach with a brush once I glued the teeth on. And you stop those dirty thoughts, this isn't that kind of a channel. At least not yet anyway. And finally, it was time to glue the teeth in place. Hot damn, that looks so much better. A little bit more glue and tissue paper to cover up that seam line around the teeth, and that was pretty much the tree done. Now, same as before, I'm painting the base black now because there will be some hard to reach spots once I glue down the tree. I try my best to plan ahead for situations like this one to ensure that I make life easier for future Terran, and while painting the base was a great attempt, I should have also painted the bottom of the tree. But alas, Wintersplinter is now glued down to their new home and I can start painting the entire miniature. As a general rule, I don't consider any of the painting I do right now to be tutorial worthy, but I started this one with a usual black base coat. A rattle can primer would have been a lot faster and worked just fine, but I'm working with limited materials right now, so cheap acrylics will have to do. This process of painting the whole mini slowly and surely actually gave me some time to think about the look I wanted for this tree. I knew that I wanted to try to get real bright color in there, and only had a little burnt sienna left, so I started mixing my own using the colors I had on hand. Even dead trees still have some color to them, some semblance of what they once were. That was a little dark. Now that the first coat of color is down, the next layer is my favorite antique white, which really fades the whole tree back a lot. Look at that gnarly old tree. It was at this point I decided to let the paint sit and move on to adding some small stones onto the base. Again, opting for my straight up wood glue to secure them. If I knew exactly where the roots of the tree were going to live, I would have just added the stones directly into the basing mix before it's set, and it probably would have bonded just fine. But I often enjoy moving from one part of a project to another when I can do so. This not only gives the paint a more appropriate amount of time to dry, but it also gave me time to see that this thing needed one more coat, a final dry brush of a titanium white to really desaturate the colors. Okay, for real now, the tree is done. From here, I go around painting the stones black and the rest of the base a mottled brown. I mix in various amounts of antique white and black to get some tone variation, as well as the tiniest amount of yellow for some subtle color. The stones get finished off with some gray and brown paints, and I finally get to try something that's been on my mind for ages. We've got this little caffeine cubby in our kitchen, where all of the tea and coffee and things live, and one morning while I was contemplating all my life choices, I had the thought that tea looks a lot like mulch and other detritus from a forest floor. So I figured I'd give it a shot, and I'll be damned, it looks pretty good. You know what else looks great in a forest? Shrooms. To make mine, I took some brown lentils and glued them onto chopped up pieces of toothpick. Now if you own a pair of tweezers that your partner doesn't use for their face, that's going to make things a little easier. Alternatively, just cut off one end of the toothpick, dip it in super glue, attach it to your little lentil, dust it with baking soda, and then cut the stem to size. Boom! Mini mushrooms. Gluing these together in little clumps and painting them up adds just a nice touch of ground cover for the base. And that's that. One Wintersplinter, cursed tree, or whatever villainous vegetation you need for your game. As always, I appreciate feedback and support, but right now I'm asking people check out the donation links in the description of my videos. There's plenty of charities and organizations that need your help a lot more than I do. If you found any information in this video to be helpful or insightful, please share it with a fellow crafter and subscribe for future content. As always, stay safe, keep crafting, and cheers.